Hey guys, this is Kirop speaking, and in today's video we are finally going to do a new Q&A. And last video I asked you for questions, and I have compiled a big list of them, 41 to be exact, and also updated the FAQ, which was in bad need of updating. It was from November 2017 or something. Yeah. Okay, the link to that FAQ, very important, because there are many questions you have asked that are not answered herein, but rather in the FAQ. The link to that is down below in the description. Also, you find timestamps to all the questions and what the questions are down in the description below. Another thing that is linked down in the description is the old Q&A video from 2014, which still is highly relevant. Not many of these questions have changed their answers since then. And for instance, the ever-recurring diesel, Wankel, rotaries, wanking engines is answered in there pretty well. I mean, since then 5 years have passed, but despite the markets having changed, the real-world markets, the answers can be extrapolated from there and are still basically the same. So that is all ticked off already, and now let's get into the new questions to keep it fresh. I have divided up the questions into campaign questions, designer questions, which I mean the car and engine designer questions with, and then the exporter questions and miscellaneous questions. So we start out with the campaign questions. Question number 1. What is the general timeline for development, campaign, and the forced induction revamp? Well, first let's talk about the current state of the game. We consider the engine designer mostly feature complete. There are of course minor things missing, like the engine aesthetics and superchargers and more turbo options and so on, but that is exactly what the forced induction revamp does, at least the latter few things. And the car designer is also pretty much complete. Feature complete, that is. Not content complete. Not by a long shot. There are still so many more bodies and so on coming, of course. And we are currently mostly focusing on the campaign, as you have all noticed, with the Lite campaign v3 finally coming to the Unreal 4 engine version of the game. And the general timeline from here looks like we are consistently going to add content to the game while we are developing the campaign. And it will go Lite campaign v3, v4, maybe v5 and other Vs until the Lite campaign is considered done and we can go towards the Grand campaign. And once that is done, or mostly done, the Grand campaign that is, mostly done, we will then be doing the forced induction revamp. It is, in the grand scheme of things, it is not that important because we already have a boost producing thing in the engine designer. So everything else is basically content, but the forced induction revamp, like the modeling for the superchargers and so on, will be done during the campaign development already. That has nothing to do with the campaign and can be done on the side of things. So that's all good and will continue to go on. So forced induction revamp coming when the Grand campaign is mostly done. And then after all that, multiplayer will be reintroduced, which I'm very much looking forward to. Question number 2. The difference between the Lite and the Grand campaign. What is it? Well, the difference mainly is the scope of the campaign and the world map. So the Lite campaign will always be the little map with the fictional countries, Gazmir, Froenia and so on. And the Grand campaign will be a representation of the real world to some extent. Of course, it will have different game modes where it's not always completely modeled according to the real world, but it will be playing a lot different because there's so many different markets. And that is something we should talk about in question number 3. How will markets be split up in the Grand campaign? Well, we are going to split them up into not too many sections, and that would be around-ish, maybe 25 markets, overall for the whole world. So for instance, you would probably have several different ones for the US, while Canada probably is part of those markets, and in Europe you would have a few, but for instance Scandinavia would be one and the same market, with Denmark probably outside of that, which is much more German-centric in that regard, but kind of a mix. And then some of the Eastern European countries blocked together, and yeah, like reasonable collections of countries will be put into the same regions, and so that we overall end up with around 25. The exact number isn't determined, and how we're going to split them isn't determined, and there will probably be options to have a simplified real-world map where there's just more or less continents to play with, or maybe something like 10 regions or so. So it's customizable for sure, and we are coming to that in a later question. Question number 4. Will there be contracts to make emergency, taxi, or military vehicles? Or any kind of contracts to make such vehicles? And the answer is probably not. That is outside of the scope of the game for now. That might be coming later on though, and the way they would work is basically scenario-like, where contracts are on offer, and you can try to design a good car for such contract, and then if your company is actually awarded with that, then yeah, you get the job and sell X number of vehicles you're signed up for. I'm not entirely convinced if this is a great gameplay mechanic, because it more or less limits the scope of your build quite a bit, into crams it into a scenario format, which is more limiting than the whole campaign setting. But so many people seem to be asking for it, so if that is so liked, then I mean, we could take a look at that once the game is done. So after 1.0, maybe include that as kind of free update, maybe, or as part of some expansion, maybe as part of a larger DLC or something. I don't know. We shall see, but that is definitely on the table. Question number 5. A company motorsport team or sporting events, etc. Well, yes, that is much requested, and we also have had that thought, obviously, since 2012 or something. And the answer is, yeah, that would be awesome, but way out of scope for Automation 1.0. That would probably be, if we ever embark on that, a full-blown expansion, where you are leading a company and at the same time have some kind of stock car racing, as a stock car, the production car racing, which you adopt for racing, and develop your engines in there for the racing team and so on. That would be really cool to do it in the automation's level of detail, and something we would be very keen to develop, but man, that would take some time. So we're not talking about that. 1.0 first, and then we see how the wind blows, because there are so many other things people are requesting as well, and I think diesels and Wankels and that stuff are certainly higher up on the list. Question number 6. Would it be possible to have more than one car model or one engine family per factory being produced per factory? And the answer to that is no. Well, it would be possible, so technically yes, practically no, because we think that would play pretty poorly. And that is because there would be so many complications for how you would handle factories. We have deliberately chosen it to be this way because it simplifies so many things in the UI and to the player as a concept. If you're strictly running with the one factory for one family and one factory for one model, then you always know what you have. And when you, let's say, you cancel your production, or you want to switch out a production, what percentage of that factory do you then actually have? And how is it similar to what other things you produce in it? And how does that compare? And let's just head explosion once you delve into all the consequences of sharing factories. It's becoming insanely complex to a degree which we do not like to have in the game, neither from a programmer's point of view nor from a player's point of view. I think our compromise here is pretty solid. Question number 7. Will there be a customizable campaign setup? Absolutely, yes. That is something we are aiming for. You already, of course, see it in the Lite campaign, the setup screen. And that is going to be fully implemented for the Lite campaign V4, once we have our engineers back and so on. But it will be mostly functional without the engineers, that is, for the Lite campaign V3 once that is done. And that already has some control over markets and their volatility and so on, but not quite the customizable setup you are implying here, I understand. Will you be able to have a fully customizable world, as in randomized country stats and so on? I think the answer to that is yes. A tentative yes. To what degree it will be customizable will remain to be seen, but in the grand campaign we are aiming for having a kind of historic campaign and a custom campaign mode, and yeah, you just choose what you want. And a custom campaign with realistic countries and a custom campaign with completely random stuff. Question number 8. Will you be able to trade tech with other car manufacturers? I think the answer to that is no, not directly. There won't be a tech market per se, but what you will be able to do is to buy out other companies. And we're not quite sure, or what you will be able to probably be able to do. We're not quite sure if that will make it into 1.0 or not. But the plan is to be able to buy out companies, and with that you would get their tech, their current tech, and potentially have some options to get some of their engineers as well, which have some juicy knowledge with them. And that is the extent to which you can buy tech. Question number 9. Will you be able to see competitor cars? That is a very good question. One that doesn't get asked nearly often enough, I think, because that is something that would add a lot of immersion to the game if you actually can see your competitors and not them only have a spreadsheet representation. And the answer to the question is yes, maybe. We have something worked out, and I can share that with you. So we think it would be possible to make a submit your design to the carpool button somewhere in the designer while you're playing the campaign. And that would upload your .car file to a general database where it then gets filtered and selected if it's a reasonable design, and we would only be looking at the actual design of the car, not necessarily the tech specs of the car, and have the looks of the car be implemented for that car body, referencing that type of car body, or not only the type, but that specific car body and that specific trim body, and then have it as an online mode download that one into your campaign, not the one you just submitted naturally, but a selection of them that are user generated if they are deemed fitting, and then have them appear in your game. And that way you not only can see all the stats, but also you will see quite unique designs from generated by other users for sure, but ones that are fitting the game. And that could be done, that could work even for mod bodies in that way, if we wanted to. I think that is the way to go, because we can't possibly make so many different cars that everything is covered. That's just not possible. So there will have to be some kind of LinkedIn user thing. And maybe you see some of your old designs at some point as competitor cars. Wouldn't that be cool? So I think that might be a solution, and we certainly look forward to having that in some ways. For now, you can always compare at least your stats to competitor cars by clicking the demographic in the designer. That brings up the comparison bar mode in your side panel. Question number 10. Will there be concept cars and limited production cars? Well, yes, we have thought about them. We even had them for the longest time in all our spreadsheets, and I think they will make it back in some further on Lite campaign. Maybe in V5 or something? Because that is... it's a whole different can of worms, the kind of limited production and concept car, how that affects company prestige and so on. It would, if it is implemented, it will be implemented to a reasonably proper degree, so that you get the effects you would think they have. And there will certainly be a rarity modifier to prestige to the car, and limited production cars would certainly see that. And your factories would be then given the order to, like, yeah, okay, produce a maximum of 500 of this, and then no more. Yes, but that requires our distribution screen to properly exist, and it would maybe done via marketing instead of through the designers themselves. So that remains to be seen how it exactly is going to be implemented, but we do have some thoughts about it already, and I think it will play really well. Question 11. Will there be special or random events? The answer to that is yes, but not entirely special, random bullshit kicking you in the ass and then leaving you to bleed out in the ditch. Not like that, random and cruel, but rather in a way that is more similar to the more modern Civ games, where you have an event happen and then there comes up how you react to that event. And there will always be options that mitigate damages and so on, or completely avoid them. We don't want it to feel like the game screwing you over, but rather the game presenting you with an interesting problem that has a solution. It may be a completely grey solution, not a great solution, but at least there is something you can influence that makes the event better or worse depending on what you want to achieve. So I think that is the way to go with automation as well, because it is such a deterministic game that we don't want to have complete random crap in there that is screwing you over. So special events, just like recalls and so on, will be about mitigating risks, or you will always have the option to mitigate risks. And that, I think, makes for very intriguing gameplay. So now it is time for the car and engine designer specific questions. Question number 12. Will there be a badge/text maker in the game? And that is specifically referring to fixtures and the currently horrible way of lining up individual letters and so on. Yes, the answer to that is, of course we are aware of the problem. Of course we want to fix it. The difficulty is implementing it, which isn't easy. But we have started looking into that already, and I think it will only be a matter of time before a proper text maker thing will be a thing. Badges, on the other hand, probably not. You will always be able to piece them together, and maybe we will have a badge maker in that you can have some geometric shapes which you can order in a certain way, like the current parts you have of badges, and then you can save that as your badge, like a collection of 2 or 3 items which are locked together. But that kind of goes together with question number 13. Will there be fixture groupings as template? The answer to that is hopefully, maybe. It is difficult to implement because you are moving around in a 3D space that you can skew and rotate on whatever where you want, and it is not easy to make something work in that kind of environment, especially with the surface you're applying it to not being the same all the time. But yes, I mean, we briefly had something similar working in the key engine, but I don't think we ever really put it in because it wasn't working reliably enough. And I think that is something we would like to get back to, but it won't appear for quite a while. Question number 14. Will there be changes / improvements to the car body morphing? I think the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. There's very little we can do to make the system any better from here without massive time investments into it. And for what big benefit, when you think of gameplay, would that be? Well, not that much. I don't think it's worth it at this point to invest more into that. Will there be more bodies, though, that are covering the missing parts in that? Well, yes, obviously. That is why we'll have to make plenty and plenty of cars, because car body morphing is pretty limited. We are, of course, aware of the limitations, and yeah, that's unfortunate, but we are dealing with a really, really complex system here, and it's already pretty amazing that it works that well as is. So unfortunately, there's not much more we can do there to improve it. Question number 15. Will custom bodies be able to be made in the game? And that is a clear no. And I'm laughing because that is, if you were a developer, you would probably be also laughing because this is quite ridiculous. It's basically asking, hey, you guys, could you quickly just like program this little thing called 3D Studio Max and put it in the game? Yeah, thank you very much. And also make it such that it basically is not that difficult as 3D Studio Max, but more or less does all the things by itself. That would be swell. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, that's an absolute no way. It's to a developer that sounds like a completely outlandish question. But I can see where it's coming from. I mean, if you don't know anything about it, why not ask, right? So, but yeah, that is a clear no. Question number 16. Will we ever get a true paint shop or a livery and decal maker? Well, no, because of technical limitations. We are already using the alpha channel of the bodies as for stamping fixtures. So that, like making holes in the body, and that is a very limiting factor when it then comes to different paints and so on, because, well, we have one channel less to deal with, and that makes it really hard then to go beyond that. So unfortunately, that's a little limited technically, because we are already doing other things that are far more complex, like body morphing and stamping in a 3D mesh, which is super awesome, by the way. It seems so mundane after all these years, but that is something that is not a given. And that, unfortunately, is blocking us from making something really cool with paints and decals. But making decals is, again, something that is more about modding, and no, there won't be direct modding inside of the game. No, we are not 3D Studio Max. But you can always make your own decals in proper 3D programs and then export them to automation and have your own mod. That is not too difficult to do. Question number 17. Will there be cosmetic options for tires? Like white walls, tires with red lines, yellow lines and whatnot. And the answer to that is yes, probably yes. That is not too difficult to do. And we have thought about it, and in general we are quite keen on making that happen. It is not too much effort for the added immersion that would bring. Question number 18. Will there be open wheeler bodies? You've probably tried out like the lawnmower mod, which by the way is pretty awesome. And you see how limited that really is, and what kind of problems it has and so on. And those problems, to a large degree, stem from that it is an open wheeler body. It is not trivial, technically almost impossible to make an automation with the current systems implemented, and we are not going to change those systems from a fundamental point of view at this point in development. That would be ridiculous and not responsible to do so. So unfortunately, no open wheeler bodies in the game. Question number 19. Will the older key bodies return to Unreal 4? And the answer to that is yes. Almost all of them. There are a few which might be so damn broken that they are not coming back, but that would be a handful of them. So most of the others you are used to seeing from the old key version will certainly make it back over time. It will take some time to port them over, as we've always stated. But yes, they will make their way into Unreal 4. And if not, then we will have new cars made that are acting as replacements for those old cars. Question 20. Will you be able to choose different colors for fixtures? Probably at some point, yes. There's also some difficulties in implementing that, and would be a bit of a stretch when it comes to time and effort required, but it has big benefits as well, like that would make it completely customizable of what you see on cars, which is awesome. So it might be worth it to implement that, and we are certainly looking into it at least. Question number 21. When will engine aesthetics come back to the game? Yeah, in Key we did have a choice of different engine valve covers and colors and so on. And what we want to do for the engine customization in Unreal 4 is something similar but better. And that is why we still haven't implemented it yet, because it will take a bit of effort to make that happen and have customizable text on it and so on, or somewhat customizable text on it. So yes, it's definitely coming back. When is a good question? Probably in the not too far future. I can see it making it back in Lite Campaign V4-ish, maybe V5, but maybe even a bit sooner. Now, it depends on what our artists are up to, and it also requires a bit of development time from our programmers. So we shall see, but it's definitely coming back. Question number 22. Will you be able to have multiple vehicles in a photo scene? Answer to that is we would love to do that, and probably yes. That is certainly something we really like to do, especially for the museum, like seeing your cars lined up next to each other and so on. That would be fantastic. So certainly something we're going to work on. Timing-wise, no idea. But I would guess before the grand campaign is starting proper development, as in after the Lite campaign V5 or something, then yeah, we should maybe see the first simplified prototypes of that, and I'll keep you updated. So it's definitely something we want to have in the game. Ah, yes. Question number 23. Individual gear ratios. Oh man, this comes up so often. Okay, let me tell you the quick and very, very brief and even quicker story of it. We tried that years ago. It played like shit, and we threw it out again. That's the story. And will we do it again? The answer is no, because we've tried it and it wasn't good. So yeah, we even had a complete gearbox designer in the game. That was, when was that? In the prototypes of the car designer, the very first prototypes of the car designer, like in 2013, 14-ish, and yeah, it just didn't play well. Basically, the reasons for that is it gave you so much rope to hang you with without actually having real benefits. And it was very tedious. And then you would say, okay, well, that's the common argument you hear, but then make an advanced mode and a simple mode. But, yeah, but that is like double and triple development time you're asking for there. Like, have the normal mode, a normal mode, but which is also compatible to the advanced mode, of course. So underlying changes. So it's not like you're leaving the old mode the same. You have to change it completely to be adaptable to the new mode. And then have the new mode on top and playtest all of that, which then gives you more layers of complexity. and more layers of shit goes wrong, and we have to debug everything, and we have to fix bugs everywhere. Like the constant of development. Yeah, don't try to have two things in there at once that solve the same problem. That is not really where you want to go. So unfortunately, no, that is not planned to be implemented again, because it didn't work the first time. It was really shit. Also, I should add to that the current system, even though lots of people are complaining about it, actually gives you a really wide range of different configurations, and you can more or less do whatever you want within. Like, some people want to have a lower first gear ratio and so on, but then again, the 4x4 simulates a low box, so that's not really an issue. So yeah. Anyway, that's a question that comes up so often. Should probably be in the FAQ. Question number 24. Will X tech or Y material make it into the game? And okay, that is a fair question. And let me provide you with a rough guideline for answering the question yourself. Ask yourself, first off, is this a technology you frequently see on the road in current year, or have seen it on the road since 1945 on a very frequent basis? If the answer to that is yes, then you have a case. If the answer to that is yes, we probably already have been thinking about it though, and the reasons to not implementing it so far might be multifold, and then we have to talk about the specific case. If the answer to that is no, but it's cool, then, well, sorry, this is a game about production vehicles, and we can't spend so much time on just making cool shit happen. That we would like to, don't get me wrong, we would definitely like to have all kinds of crazy ass awesome technology in the game, but no, it's not going to happen. It's just not feasible. Question number 25. Weight distribution tweaking? Well, yeah, that's a valid question. I mean, that is what car engineers do all the time, to a smaller or a larger extent at least, and in sometimes even spend loads of engineering time on just switching the weight around from its natural distribution you would get. So the answer to that is probably not, but I think it would work as a gameplay mechanic. So you would simply have a slider which shifts the weight from its current state X% forward or backward, and you have an escalating cost of engineering time on both ends. So that could work. I think it would play reasonably well. But where would you put it? And how would we actually implement it? Because currently all the weight in the game is calculated with boxes. Like boxes, and the correct, or somewhat correct, weights are assigned to them, and they are placed in a certain way. So from what boxes do you steal the weight to move around? And in what percentage? And then you have to test it across all the potential solutions. And that is a lot of work that can go into a pretty small gameplay mechanic, which has, let's say, a questionable impact. Questionable in size, not in what it does, because it certainly seems reasonable a request. Question number 26. Will there be quality slider / tech pool bonuses, like in the Lite campaign, in sandbox mode? The answer to that is most likely yes. I was thinking about implementing a mode, or not a mode, but rather kind of a sandbox company profile, where you can set your tech pool out of a certain number of points which you can assign, so that you can't make something that is completely overpowered, but you have to make compromises or put a little bit in everything, and thus can shape what kind of car and company you want to make in sandbox, or company you want to build with in sandbox. So if you want to make American pushrod engines that are actually Morrican quality, then yeah, sure, you would be able to set your top-end tech pool to +10, which is approximately where they were with pushrod engines, and just build from there and pay normal engineering times. Not that it really matters in sandbox mode, but I can understand why people would not want to see like 15 years worth of engineering there for just building something that they consider normal in the context of a specific car company. So yeah, it's a reasonable request, and we are definitely looking into implementing that. Question number 27. What happened to the big engine designer revamp? And what they are talking about here with that question is there is a video on our channel which is called something like Engine Designer Revamp Discussion, and I shall link it below. And that video is talking about quite a few game mechanics changes to the engine designer which make it a lot more realistic. Currently it's very, very heavily parameterized. There's not much real things going on in the engine designer, and it is a well-tweaked system overall, apart from maybe the compression and how that advances, and emissions are completely random. not random, but like pulled out of our behinds. So that is something that I want to see in game at some point, but it will not make it into Automation 1.0, unfortunately. It would more or less be a complete rewrite of the entire engine designer. All the, like basically all the engine performance, how it is generated, and yeah, that is with resonances then, and it's crazy stuff. It's all working in spreadsheet and working well. Would make the game quite a bit more complex in that regard, so that's also a concern. But yeah, I still think it's viable, but not for Automation 1.0. So we will have to wait for something larger thereafter. It could be part of Automation 2.0 if that ever comes out, or some other bigger update. Yeah, I would love to see it in game. That is cool stuff, really, with the resonance tweaking and so on. Question number 28. Oh, that's a big one. Oof. Why the model, trim, family, variant limitations? So why do we split up model and trim and family and variant, that is for car and engine, in that way? Like, there's so many requests we get, like, why can't I change the head type? Well, the answer is we need to draw the line somewhere. And that line needs to be such that it plays well, it doesn't get too complex, and it doesn't get too exploitable. So let's say there are no limitations, and just follow down with me that path. What would that mean? Like, everything is changeable. There is no concept of a model or base platform which is unchangeable stuff, but rather you can change whatever you want. So, okay, let's say you build a leather frame car with aluminium panels, and then yeah, you go from there with double wishbone, which don't go on there actually, do they? Yes. Yeah, no, they do. McPherson doesn't go on there. So yeah, you build that, and then you say but now I'm going to build my sporty trim. So you switched out to a monocoque chassis and like carbon fiber panels and a push rod suspension, and it doesn't really fit on a ladder frame. Oh no, we are now we're now on monocoque. We can fit that. Oh, you already see some complications there. Yeah. And now, what has that car to do with the old one? Can you tell me? Really? Anything? Anything at all? Apart from roughly the looks? No, not really, right? That would become really confusing. And why would you need... Okay, here comes the big one. Why would you need more than one car model then, at that point? Okay, you follow along, I assume, so that is a good question to ask. Because you could cover most things with just one then, if you could do that. Is that realistic? Not really. You don't see real car manufacturers doing that, so something is limiting them. So that brings us back to, okay, but where is that limitation? Well, it's a good question. And we chose to draw the line where we have drawn the line. And that line is chosen such that it leads to the best possible gameplay, not necessarily the most realistic results. We think that the current line between model and trim is chosen such that the factory stuff makes the most sense, and for the engine is chosen such that you can't just blatantly exploit the game mechanics to a T, where you build one engine in 1946 and then that's all you need, and from there you just change heads. I mean, some real car manufacturers have done that, but we want you to design more than one engine, because designing engines is fun. And so why would we want to encourage people to do something that is not really fun to do in the game? So it is more about gameplay than realism, really, this question. That's an interesting one. It has been discussed to death. And this current line, which we have, won't change. That's a very important thing to note. This is what we have. This is what we are going to stick with. Now we are coming to some exporter-related questions. Question 29. Will you have the ability to export a whole car family as a unit to BeamNG? The answer to that is yes, most likely, because the system in automation and BeamNG is very, very similar to how we are dealing with car families, or like a model and trims. It's very similar in BeamNG compared to automation. So in principle, that is entirely possible. When you look at the implementation of that though, it requires a pretty big rewrite of how we are doing things. And it would take roughly 3 weeks of development time just for that feature. And you can imagine that, well, we can't just have 3 weeks of full development on something like that easily. So at some point we will need to get around to that, because it would be such a handy feature, but when, we don't know. It might even have to wait until after 1.0 for the game. Question number 30. Will there be more car stats added to the car description in BeamNG? And the answer to that is most likely yes. It is rather barren at the moment, and that's not a good looker. So it shouldn't be too hard to do, but getting around to that, it's like the previous question, the answer to the previous question, it's not that easy. It takes some time to get into it and then add all that stuff. It might take a while. Pull that all out and put it in. So probably yes. Question number 31. Will there be exporters to other driving games? Answer to that is maybe. We are certainly open to the possibility, and what it would require is pretty heavy involvement from the developer of those other games, or that potential other game, for making an exporter. Because we're certainly not going to do it by ourselves. We need some assistance to get all the stuff as close to right as we can. The collaboration with BeamNG was awesome, and you need to be aware that we had pretty close collaboration there, where we are sharing development time, and we had, like, they were very kind to provide us with a person for loads of time just working with us to get the exporter straight. That was really good, and that is the way we can really make something cool like the exporter happen. And that is not a given, of course, because the other development teams are also looking at that like, well, is this really something we can afford? Is this really something we need? And in the case of BeamNG, I mean, automation and BeamNG fit together really well. So that is just really beneficial for both teams. So that was mutually agreed upon and super beneficial to have the exporter, and really cool collaboration. Still, again, big thanks to the BeamNG guys. And for that to happen again with a different driving game, we would be open to the possibility, definitely, but that needs some pretty big input from the other side as well. Question number 32. Could you export cars into a 3D printable format? That's a funny one, and we have actually thought about that and the feasibility of that. Maybe yes. Maybe yes. Like, just don't try to print them in one-to-one. That would be wasting a lot of plastic. So yeah, that would be cool. if we get around to it and it's not too much work, then I can see that happen. And now we're getting to some miscellaneous questions. Question number 33 is an interesting one we get all the time, in some way or another, most of the time in not too flattering ways. So many seem to be asking for engine and car stuff to be added, while very few seem to care about the campaign. Well, why is that? Well, I think that is an interesting question, and one that is answered by looking at how we developed the game. It started out as an engine-only game, so who would buy an engine-only game? Like, the theme of the game has never changed. We always wanted to have a car company tycoon game with roughly, like, which is very technical, yes, but not slouching on the campaign part, not slouching on the business part. So that was always known. But what have we had so far? Well, we started out with a few years of just the engine designer. So who buys just an engine designer? Certainly not really those tycoon people, are they? It's like absolute petrol heads who buy such a thing. Like, an engine designer, come on. An engine designer, what are you going to do with it? Like, nothing. It's crazy. It's just cool and techy and nerdy. It's awesome. It's awesome in a way, but really specialized players. So yeah, and then it was an engine designer and a car designer. Well, what do you do with the cars? Well, nothing, really. So who buys that? Well, yeah, people who are really into cars. Well, how many people who are really into cars care really about a tycoon business game? Well, not that many, but I mean, there are certainly some among them, and always, like from the earliest start, there were a lot of people in there as well who really want to see this on the basis of such a technical foundation to turn into the promised tycoon game. But what is the biggest audience at that point, and we are right now, going to say about implementing campaign things? Well, they don't really care, do they? Well, that's natural, and that is something we accept, and we are not going to be swayed from that path. So that is leading us into question 34. What is our stance on that, and why don't we refocus the game? We won't refocus the game to a just more awesome sandbox thingy, because that is not what we want to do. It is not the goal of the game, it has never been. We have clearly stated from the start, from 2011 onward, what this game is going to be, and we are going to keep on that path and deliver a finished product, which is what we promised all those years back. People who are really into car and engine stuff and want more cool shit like that, we understand them, we hear them, but we can't cater to that because that would break our promises, and that is not what we want to do with the game. So it is pretty much straightforward a no to a refocus, and we are certainly going to add more cool shit. That's definitely not a no to that, but it has to be within the confines of the scope of the game, and it needs to be feasible. So that needs to be always considered, but we're not going to change what this game is. Stuff like the BeamNG exporter, for instance, that is something we have done to as basically as a thank you to all the audience that is mainly about cars and engines, because this is really cool shit, isn't it? So that really caters to that audience and not to the tycoon people. And yes, that already has taken like probably effectively stolen like 2 or 3 months from development time, but it is hugely successful and feasible for what it gave us with a much bigger audience. And that is also adding to question number 33, the previous one, why we are seeing so many car and engine focused people and who want cool shit for their favorite thing. But yeah, I mean, it's still a tycoon game. Question number 35. Why the Unreal Engine over Unity? That is something that has come up from time to time. We don't hear that question that often, but I think it's a quite interesting one. The simple answer to that is we chose the one that we think is long-term more powerful to use for the kinds of games we are making, which are highly technical games, so far at least, highly technical games that do require us to make some engine changes. We did look into both, of course, and Unity doesn't provide us with, or didn't at that point, I don't know what it's like now, wouldn't provide you with source code access for, was it for any tier, or I'm not quite sure on that, at least not for the tiers we would be able to pay. And so that one was out because of that, and we are doing some really crazy shit like morphing of the cars, and that is not straightforward at all to do without having access to the base engine code. So yeah, this is Unreal Engine versus Unity. We chose the one which we think long term gives us more options and is more powerful in the long term. So that's it. Question number 36. How are you doing financially as a company? Pretty well. Pretty well. Probably if any business guy would look at that, they would say like, "You are doing amazing." It's not necessarily amazing. We don't have any debts. We do have quite a bit of a buffer for development. Like if we stopped earning a dime right now, we would still be able to fund our team, our whole team, like no sales whatsoever. We'd still fund development for 1.5 years, I believe, something around there. 1 year, 1.5 years. And that was, of course, not always the case. We scaled up development and our team as we saw higher base incomes, as from sales, that is. And we started out with 2 people working on the game with full-time jobs. Then they scaled down and became full-time developers. Then I joined and had been working for them for free for like 3 or 4 years. Then joined the team as a full-time employee as well. So it is growing, and now we are like 8 people. I think, are we 8? Yeah, we really need to update that picture of our group. Anyway, so yes, we are doing pretty well now, and the BeamNG exporter thing has given us an injection of cash as well, which means that we will absolutely be able to finish what we set out to do, which is great. And don't have to fear, at least currently, if things don't go completely haywire in some way, we'll be able to finish the game as promised, which is cool. And hopefully we will have some cash over for all kinds of other projects which are coming thereafter, including automation stuff, of course. Question number 37. How did the game develop internally? I think what the question refers to is how did this, like, the game idea start, and how was it initially set up? Who was pulling the strings, so to say? And it was Andrew and Caswell who were coming up with the idea originally. You can probably still find on our YouTube channel. Can you still find? I think you can still find the Rocket Hub crowdfunding campaign video from 2011. Was it 2011? Like way back. So these 2 guys started making the game, and they started it because they were looking at games like Detroit and Old Timer, and they were thinking like, yeah, we can do that, but like we don't like this kind of you are selling whatever. These don't feel like cars you're selling, more like fridges or whatever. And it's completely interchangeable products because there's no real technical things about that tycoon that makes it feel like you're selling actual cars. And then they looked at them at each other and thought like, but we do have the skills to make something that is more awesome ourselves, right? And boy, if they knew where we were today with the game, they would probably have turned around like screaming or something like, no, that's way too much work. But it worked out. So well, that's how the game developed internally, so to say, the game idea. And from there, it continually grew, but it never really changed its focus. Like I said in the previous questions, we had a pretty clear vision from the start, and these 2 guys, Andrew and Kaz had a pretty clear vision from the start, and that has not changed. From like a few weeks ago, so I looked at what we promised back in the day, and it more or less lines up like to 95% or something with what we are still aiming for today. And most of it is now done, and that is pretty cool stuff. So yeah, the vision is certainly intact, and the game developed from there by adding good developers to it. And now we have a larger team, and it's going faster, and the quality is going up and up, which is great. So that is how it developed internally. Question 38. How did the team develop over the years? Alright, let me give you a quick rundown there. I already covered a little bit in question 37. So it started out with Andrew and Caswell, and we were back then using our own engine, a key engine, which was made by Jay Linda. That is Caswell's girlfriend. And because back in the day you really didn't have any good engine options. That is why we went with a key engine from the start. So those two guys mainly worked on it, and Jay also helped them out for all the crazy shit like car body morphing and so on, which came later, but more the procedural aspects of things. That's always her doing. Whenever it's getting scary, complicated with really techy stuff, then she's the one to talk to. So those three were developing it mostly, and then I joined by finding them on the forum and was like, yo guys, I'm a physicist, yo, and I can help you with shit, so here we go. I just start posting on the forums and be really German about things and productive and helpful. And then I joined the team as a beta tester. Yes, so that was my start in 2011. I started as a beta tester for the game, and no one really took care of the beta, so I decided, like, come on, I can do a better job here, so let me organize it a bit, without being asked, of course. So I started doing that, and then soon followed me becoming the lead beta tester, and a year on from that, I was the producer of the game, basically, keeping track of all the shit. And then I basically started having my fingers in all kinds of design stuff too, making most of the game mechanics, like the progressions and so on. So that was good stuff. And then finally, we're coming closer to 2015, 16-ish. We got onto early access, and was it 16? Yeah, I can't even remember. Was it 15? 2015, right? March 2015 or something. Yes. So when we got into early access, I had been working with them for 4 years, but for free. So what we did then is finally be able to give me a full-time position as lead designer and producer, which I basically had been doing for the last year or so anyway, working as a researcher and doing the game in my free time. So and that was good stuff, and that meant I could move from Germany to New Zealand. And at roughly the same time, a little later we got, was it later? Can't even remember properly. We got Isaac, who is our junior programmer, who's now basically a senior as well. He is working together with Caswell to implement all the very tech-heavy stuff. He is focused more on the UI stuff, and Kaz more is focused on implementing all the game mechanics, and he does basically everything. It's crazy stuff. He knows. You can ask him about anything when it comes to code and how to set it up and stuff, and he will work out an answer. So he's doing all the back end as well, and all that good, those very useful things. Basically, our programmer for everything. And so Isaac is helping out since then, and then we got Hamish, who is doing 3D art and helping Andrew with that. And he's also doing amazing work. You see all his factories in the game now, and the photo scenes, and all those things, and of course car bodies coming over, being ported over, being fixed up, and so on. It's and fixtures. They are doing loads of stuff. And of course we still have Jay working for us, who is mostly doing the procedural stuff, and she did a lot of things for the exporter, as did Kaz. And now, we just last week got a new guy, which is the first one working for me specifically, or with me specifically, not really for me. And that is Matt. And Matt is going to help me prototype future game projects. Ooh, what is that? Question 39. Do you have any plans for other games or DLC in the future? Well, you need to know that if you are a developer that only develops one product, and then once the product is done, they start on the next product, they will be gone in a few years, because that is not a sustainable business model. So of course we have plans for other games or DLC for the future, and that includes depending on how well automation does, but currently it's looking pretty solid, we would be doing some content DLC or expansion even, for automation. And we are looking into maybe having it such, of course that nothing is set in stone there, but what we think is would be a fair business model is if we are on a yearly cycle and develop one main new feature that is really significant for automation, and then have that update only costs like a third of full price or half of full price, and full price we mean like $35 for the game, for those who already own the previous year version, and just a full price upgrade, or non-upgrade, like full new game for those who buy it for the first time. I think that is a pretty fair deal if there is significant enough content added each year. Another alternative might be going the DLC route, where we have either expansions or DLC with significant stuff. For instance, we have been, like mentioned in the FAQ, we're considering doing engine packs, which would come at a really fair price. I at least think, not likely. The V16s aren't priced that way because of the V16 engine in there. You have to know that. That's covered in the V16 FAQ, why that is. So 3 engine types, maybe $5 or something, and stuff like that. And maybe diesel engines, that is more of a heavy load. That's 6 months of development time, costs us about around-ish $150,000 to develop. And then bunkers, basically the same thing in cost. And diesels, electrics, hybrids will probably be more like in 9 months to a year or something to properly implement that, all that stuff. Yeah, there's a lot there, and it all costs a lot. Development is real expensive. So yeah, I mean, there are plenty of plans there, but that is automation. There are plenty of plans, potential plans for automation itself. But what about other games? Well, other games, yes please. Of course, I have since a long time had plenty of ideas for games and prototypes even of other games. And now with Matt joining our team at an opportune time where we think that development of automation is coming closer to its end. We are nowhere done yet, that is for sure, but it's coming closer to an end. We need to start to have solid prototypes, at least prototypes, of other games so that we can test if they are viable for future actual games to become realized. And that is what I'm now partially working on with together with Matt. And it's really exciting stuff to be working on this with those things. And there's no lack of ideas, of course. And you will be, of course, there will be much speculation what that could be. Like, what could they be making next? Basically anything. Could be anything. And I can't tell you until we know. And be sure that I will tell you once we know. Well, we kind of know one thing. It will be absolutely friggin' awesome. But that's something we're going to discuss in a few years, I guess. We're first always saying that automation is priority number 1. So we are going to focus entirely on automation and diverting time when it is available to making stuff that comes thereafter. And currently in the phase where we are mainly fixing bugs and implementing stuff that is planned already and kind of hashed out already, I don't have quite as much to do on that, so that means I can spend some time on not only making Q&As, but also work on potential upcoming games. Question number 40. What does everyone at the office drive? Like in real life? Let's start with the most boring one there is, and that will be mine. I'm, as a complete non-car person, you could call me, and I certainly have the perfect car for that, is a Toyota Ractis, from 2005. And that is the 1.3 liter CVT version of it. That's a really good car, super handy. I love it. The next easiest one to talk about would be Isaac, and he has gone through a lot of cars, and he loves those small 80s city cars. Honda City Turbo, for instance, and he had... How many did he have? Like 2 or 3? I don't know, but they all break and are kind of terrible. So, yes, currently he has a 2012 Nissan Leaf 24G, and also has a car which he says no one knows what the fuck it is. And that will be a 1997 Toyota Sprinter Carib AE11. And I don't know what it is, but yeah, you probably do. And then we have Casual and Andrew, and then it gets like car crazy. So first of all, let's talk about their... Where is it? Okay, here. So they have a BMW from 2006, an E60 530i, and that one is certainly being used. And when they don't use that one, they use their BMW i3, which is from 2014. So as you can see, quite a bit of electric going on in the office already. And no, we are still not going to add electric drive to automation for Automation 1.0. That's just out of scope. But there certainly are people in the office who love that shit. So now we get into the more crazy race car stuff, because both Andrew and Casual are racing from time to time, or quite often actually. Like the legal stuff, the street races with closed off roads and that are held locally especially. They have good fun there, and they have their own race cars for that. And that would be for Andrew his 1994 Mazda Lantis Type R with a V6, and that has been stuffed out with a roll cage, BC coilovers, custom-made brake pads, home-built side exhaust and headers, stripped out interior, and running the otherwise stock 130 kilowatt 2.0 liter V6, and it also has a viscous limited slip diff. Casual, on the other hand, has 2 Suzuki Cappuccinos, one that is in storage for spares, and the other one is a stripped out race car, running a Motec M400 ECU, which they are tinkering with. Has a bigger turbo, 550cc injectors, front mount intercooler, and clutch from a Mazda 323, and pressure plates from a Toyota 2K, and it's currently tuned for 86 kilowatts or 115 horsepower at the wheels, running 22.5 psi boost on 98 RON. So that is all for the office, I believe. Some pretty car crazy stuff in there, for sure. Some electric boogaloo going on as well, and then some crazy ass boring car for myself. Thank you very much. On the other hand, I think I might be the only one that ever got 5.2 liter fuel economy per 100 Ks in the office driving a fully non-electric car, which is pretty impressive. Question 41. How could I investigate the nuclear structure of the radioisotope nickel-54? Well, it's an excellent question, and one that many people ask me. Rather not. Okay, so simple answer to that is, you take a big-ass particle accelerator, you take a stable isotope of something that is heavier than that and not too far away in the, not periodic table, but the nuclear chart. Needs to be above it so that it can be reached in a fragmentation. So you strip away the electrons from your source particle, the one you found that is stable, and then you accelerate it after you've stripped the electrons, and then you smash it into a fucking wall and through the wall. And it has a small chance in that smashing through the wall to be fragmented by hitting another nucleus, like nucleus on nucleus collision, and that shaves off at like 70 to how high speeds were we running? Like 85% of the speed of light, roughly, like up to there, depending on the energy of the experiment, running like 70 to 85% of the speed of light, basically. You shave off part of the nucleus of the one you're shooting with, and that continues flying because it's going so fast that in that reaction basically it doesn't even recognize that an arm is missing and just continues on. It's just a flash wound, and from there all kinds of weird isotopes are being produced in those collisions that are continuing forward focused, flying forward focused, and then you have to sort them out depending on what they are. So they are recombobulating themselves into their new shapes and whatnot after they have lost an arm. And then they are flying on and need to be filtered. And that is done via magnetic filtering and energy degradation along the way. So you would have a left bend, right bend, and then a degrader, which slows the particles down depending on what nuclear charge they have. And depending on their charge versus mass ratio, they will be then filtered out via the magnetic sections. That is, first magnetic section, then the degrader, then another magnetic section. And that is done along a 73 meter fragment separator. And that would be the setup we used at GSI in Germany. And then you need to identify what you've actually been producing there. That is also tricky. That is where I did my PhD thesis on. To a large degree, I developed a timing detector, basically a stopwatch for single atoms or single nuclei that are flying at roughly 70% of the speed of light. And pretty successful. Got down to a time resolution for those single particles of around 10 picoseconds, which is small, which is really good, very accurate, very German, precise. And yeah, so what you do then is hope that these particles that were produced in the original collision with the target, so you shoot your beam into the target fragments, and your target beam your beam is then hopefully of the isotope you want to look at, and in an excited state after having their arms ripped out. And that is an exciting thing to happen to you. So yeah, sure, they are still excited after about 250 nanoseconds, which it takes for them to fly from one end to the other, 73 meters. It's not much. It's not even a blink of an eye. And so 250 nanoseconds, and then you have to catch them. Or you have to slow them down enough again and have them decay inside a catcher. Like you catch the now produced radioisotope, and then you see how it decays from there, because those things are not stable. They are far off the line of stability. So you wouldn't be able to observe them in nature because they are just instantly decaying. And their decay is depending on their internal structure, the energy levels and so on. And you're then mapping the various gamma rays that are emerging from the nuclei, and that gives you kind of a map of how they are decaying, and with that, the structure. You can reconstruct what structure they have inside, what energy levels they have, and yeah, that is how you figure out the nuclear structure of these rare radioisotopes, which don't exist in nature. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's like trivia. Alright, that is all questions for today. I hope you enjoyed the somewhat rambly Q&A, and see you guys next time. Oh, one more thing. Just a little tidbit for you who stayed all the way to the end. Alright, you know where the number plate FAP 365 comes from? Well, we actually have it here in Lower Hutt in New Zealand. We have seen that car. It actually exists.